Alrighty, hey everybody, we're here to talk a little bit about the Industrial Revolution and what is required to industrialize and what exactly is the Industrial Revolution. So our main question that we're trying to answer today is how did Great Britain successfully do this? Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Alright, first of all, what is industrialization? Industrialization is the process for moving from an agricultural society to one of industry. Okay, so you become much more productive with agriculture, and that allows for more people to do other things, kind of move to the city and industrialize. Great Britain is the very first country to do this, and because they were able to do this, they had a very big advantage back in the 1800s. Okay. Now, why is industrialization important? Who cares, right? Well, the reason industrialization is important is that the countries that industrialized first, they became the most powerful countries. Even if you look at the countries today that are powerful, they are the ones that have industrialized first. Okay? So why does industrialization make a country powerful? Well, if you're just thinking strictly in terms of weapons, if you have a bunch of factories and stuff, you can mass produce weapons, which will allow you to defeat any enemy that stands against you. In fact, one of the reasons we won World War II is not because we had the best weapons, it's because we had the most weapons. The ability to mass produce is a huge advantage. So if you're a country that did not industrialize, you are a country that probably gets run over by the rest of the world and is relatively weak and also not very wealthy. A really great thing about industrialization that people tend to forget and not focus enough on is that the standard of living goes way up. There is no time in human history where the standard of living goes up like during the Industrial Revolution. Okay? Life just gets so much better. And yes, there are obviously some sad stories that go with it, but the bottom line is that people started making more money, people started living longer, people had more money to spend on luxury items, people could take vacations, there was more culture, there was just it's just more of everything. All right, it's a great time in human history. Okay, technological advances, which is kind of what I'm leading into here. This is where we have things like the car, the steam engine, the plane, the train, the telegraph, the radio. All these things start getting developed during this period of time and just revolutionizes, how humans live their lives. We also have a lot of economic systems like capitalism, socialism, and communism. They get developed, during this period of time as well. Okay. So, anyways, moving on. Here's a great picture of the world at night. Okay. And I think it does a really great job just showing you how important industrialization is. So here, obviously, you see, if you look at the world, obviously the place with the least amount of electricity is Africa. And here's the messed up thing. In Africa, they've got about 1 billion people living in Africa. 1 billion people living in Africa. Yet, there's really not a lot of lights there. Sure, if you look at Egypt, Egypt's pretty lit up there. There's the Nile River where most of the Egyptians live. And there's a small chunk of lights down here, like in South Africa and stuff like that. For the most part, you got 1 billion people who are living without the lights turned on. All right? But yeah, if you look at some of the countries that have industrialized, Europe is industrialized. They've got roughly 500 million people living in Europe. It's lit up like a Christmas tree. The United States is industrialized. You got roughly 300 million people or so living there. And then you got Japan over here. Look at those guys, lit up like a Christmas tree. All right, they've got, I think, like 180-ish million people that live in there. If you look at those three areas, those are the most lit up areas in the world. And there's less people there than all of Africa combined. And yet Africa is completely kind of dark at night there. All right? So anyways, which kind of shows you the importance of industrialization. All right? Another great thing about industrialization is it shows you how productive humans are. Okay? So here you see the world GDP, which basically means GDP is how much we produce. All right? And if you look at the GDP throughout most of history, so for the past 2,000 years, we haven't really seen a lot. But then all of a sudden, during industrialization, which starts right around here, you see the amount of stuff that we are producing just explodes. Okay? And it really is hard to kind of explain, or I guess not hard to explain. It's kind of, I know a lot of times we realize just how quickly humans advance during this industrialization process. Okay? For instance, just imagine this. We learn how to fly like in the early 1900s. Okay? So the Americans are the first to kind of figure out kind of how to fly. So early 1900s, we learn how to fly. All right, so for tens of thousands of years, human beings are on the ground. Okay, and then fast forward, to 1969, and we've landed on the moon. Okay, so that means conceivably you could have been born, in 1890. All right. All right, and when you were born, when you're 10, you live in a world where humans have never flown. And then all of a sudden, when you're 12, 15 years old, people fly for the first time. You're like, holy crap, that's awesome. Well, it gets better because when you're old, when you get to your older years, you're a senior citizen, whatever, you see people on TV landing on the moon. Okay, so it's just incredible. And then look how quickly we advance just in one person's lifetime. And the industrialization process allows for us to do just great things. So what do you need to industrialize? Okay, so if you're a country, and Great Britain was the first to do it, you need what are known as the factors of production. All right, and so these are the things you need for economic success. All right, the first thing is you need land, lots of natural resources. Okay, and usually when we talk about natural resources, the biggies are you need a lot of coal for your steam engines, you need a lot of water to power your factories, and you probably need a lot of iron to help you make some steel. All right, obviously nowadays oil is incredibly important for us, but you need to have natural resources. You also need to have a very big workforce to fill in your factories. Okay, luckily enough for the Americans, it was during their industrialization process, which took place, in the 18th or the 19th and 20th centuries. The American population tripled in a 50-year time period. So that would be like the United States going from 300 million people to 900 million people in 50 years. That'd be pretty incredible. So you have to have a big labor force. And you also have to have human capital and physical capital. So capital is basically anything that is man-made that helps you get a job done or create a good or a service. So if a factory would be considered capital, okay? If you're a taxi cab driver, your cab would be considered capital. If you are a landscaper, then your lawnmower would be your capital. Okay, but you also need what is known as human capital. Okay, a country has to have people in it that know how to get things done, that are smart, that have skills, that can open businesses and get things done. All right, if a country does not have the human capital, they can't get certain things done. Like if you go to our favorite country, Djibouti, they don't have nuclear weapons. They don't have a nuclear power plant. Why? Because no one there knows how to make it. All right, and so you kind of need some of those more advanced things, these more advanced ideas like human capital to kind of get those things done. All right. Finally, you need people that are willing to take risks. You need entrepreneurs, people that are willing to risk it all to start a company. Okay. So if you don't have those people, you're not going to have those businesses. All right. So, kind of finishing this lecture off here. The Industrial Revolution does start in Great Britain, as I've already said. So it starts here in Great Britain, but eventually it spreads to the rest of the world. It first goes to the Americas, the United States, excuse me. All right. Now it's kind of funny because Great Britain actually didn't want other countries to industrialize, and so they actually made a rule that if you knew how to build a factory or you knew how machines run, you weren't allowed to leave because they didn't want this to be shared with the rest of the world. And so the guy who actually came to the Americas, we can actually track him. We know his name and everything. He actually dressed up like an old poor farmer, and he was able to sneak out of Great Britain, come to the United States, and start his own little factory. And that kind of starts to happen all over the place. It eventually spreads to Europe, eventually spreads to China and India over here and Russia and stuff like that. And eventually some parts of Africa start industrializing, parts of South America and Mexico and stuff like that. So eventually it does spread. Okay? So anyways, hope you enjoyed.